Last Sunday we had a study, to the shock sometimes I think of many, on Palm Sunday. Well, you say, Pastor, we all know that it was Palm Sunday. And of course, the study was simply this: why there's no such thing as Palm Sunday. They count Palm Sunday 6 days from Good Friday. And of course, that's what we're going to talk about today. The fact that there is no such thing as Good Friday. It is virtually an impossibility for Jesus Christ to have died on Friday and fulfill the Scriptures. And if you will stick with us in our study. Now remember, as I look and I see some amazed faces, our studies go session after session, series after series, and you're not going to just get it in this first session. We're going to set the background and the historic context, some of which we've had before. But I've not had the ability to illustrate it like I've done, and I'm hoping, God being merciful to my soul and my wearying body and brain, that we're going to get these things in print and be able to put them in your hands, and then you're going to be able to use these things to witness to others. Now, by the way, although we don't want you to copy them and give them away, if you have a copy of this, you can use it as a witnessing tool, and that's what it's for. You're going to say, there's no such thing as Palm Sunday, and there's no such thing as Good Friday, and somebody's going to look at you with a very weird look. Eyebrows are going to raise, their brow is going to furrow. What do you mean? I mean, the whole world I listened to the Weather Channel, and that dude on there wished me a happy Easter. Everybody knows, talking about the holidays and Palm Sunday and Good Friday. The fact of the matter is, we have been misled for centuries, for years, not just with the pagan aspect of it, that there's a rabbit that lays eggs and then he colors them and delivers them in the morning, the pagan aspect. But we have been given a lie that has given us a good 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll just call it Good Friday. And of course, all of it is nonsense. We have perpetuated a lie. Now, we will look at the fourfold generation curse in light of tradition probably next Sunday. But what we're going to do this Sunday is lay the historic background and then show you why it's an impossibility that Christ died on a Friday. Yes, they have Good Friday services, and they're lying from the pulpit because he could not have died on Friday. We will show that clearly from the Scriptures, and we should not believe that he died on a Friday. So we're going to begin our proof of this, first of all, by looking at a Jewish day. Now, I've got the diagram 2 up here, Israel's Exodus chronology. Now, this is going to give us a point in the Scripture for verifying the fact that Jesus Christ actually died on a Wednesday rather than on a Friday. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to look at verse number 4. God is going to show us what he considers a day. And we're going to note that most often when we come to the Bible and think of a day, we think of it in these terms, or must think of it this way in order to understand what's going on. However, there is also an aspect where some of the Gospels, for example, Mark is a good one, written to the Romans, addressed to them. The Romans were more into brawn than they were into brain, and so you have it in a condensed version, the Gospel story of the life of Christ, and things that went on, and words that were attention getters, like straightway and anon and forthwith and so forth. It's because the Roman brain had an attention deficit disorder like most American brains have today. And so Mark wrote that gospel to him. But then Luke wrote to Theophilus, the Greek, who wanted to know about the life of Christ. And of course, the Greeks were into philosophy, learning, academia, and so forth. And so there was more to it. It's more in depth, addressing the fact that Jesus was a man. Now, I said that to say that when you come to the Gospels and certain other things, you have to understand Some are written in the context or frame of reference of the Gentiles. So, when you come to phrases like, Christ is going to be raised on the third day and after the third day, is there a contradiction? And then we'll show you that no, there's no contradiction. When he says he's going to be raised on the third day, he's talking about the third day from his crucifixion, which was Saturday. And we're going to show you how that Christ, in the Gentile mind, can be raised from the dead on a Saturday, and yet after 3 days, because in the Jewish mind, Sunday had already started, and you have 6 hours of Sunday in Saturday, in the Jewish mind, because their day starts, as we'll show here, at 6 in the evening. So you can have Jesus Christ both raised on the third day, Gentile time, and after the third day, Jewish time, if you just consider those factors. And that's what we're going to do here. Show you how that there is a coordination between Gentile and Jewish time. Okay? Let's look at God's creation of time. Verse 4. God saw the light. It was good. He divided the light from the darkness. And he called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So, if you'll look at your Exodus chronology here, we'll just take Friday the 16th, all right? Was that our movie Friday, or was it Friday the 13th? Yeah, okay, well, that's good. We don't want any, that guy's name Michael with the mask. Okay, I think it's... So, he looks out, and he sees, what was it, Jason. Freddie. No, Freddie Krieger. That was another guy. All right. We're digressing. We're digressing. Attention deficit. Anon forthwith. Friday the 13th. Jason. Freddie. Okay. Let's not digress here. So we see that it's broken up into two 12-hour periods. And Jesus said, "Are there not 12 hours in the what? Day." Well, now wait a minute. Our days also have how many hours? 24 hours. But that is a combination of both night, 12 hours, and day, 12 hours, making one full day of 24 hours. And that's what we have here. God divided the light from the darkness. He called the light day, 12 hours. He called the darkness night, 12 hours. And the evening, when God's day starts at 6 o'clock in the evening, and the morning, through the daytime, 12 more hours, was the first day. Okay, he does the very same thing in verse number 8. God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Verse number 13, where it says, the evening and the morning were the third day. And on he goes until he goes through 7 days. And of course, man was created on the 6th day, and on the 7th day, man rested. So you have a recreative week, but God is allowing us to see what he thinks of time. Now, when you come to the resurrection of Jesus Christ and take it from that day backwards, you have got to keep that in mind. God's concept of a day. Because if you don't, you'll end up like others thinking that Christ was crucified on a Friday, and he was not. It is impossible. And what's worse to us is that it is a religious lie. Think of how many people on this Good Friday took time off work so that they could observe this holy day. And you know what they observed? A lie. It's a flat lie. Religionists have been lying to us for centuries, as we said. So, let's turn to Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23. And in verse number 32, God tells us how he wanted Israel to observe their days. And that's what we're doing here. We are setting the background for, well, Pastor, how can you say that he wasn't crucified on Friday? Well, stick with me. Let's learn something here. Verse number 32. and it shall be to you a Sabbath of rest. You'll afflict your souls. In the 9th day of the month at even. And the evening and the morning, you see, at even. At 6 p.m., that's when the Jews started their day. As a matter of fact, that's when the Jews started counting the hours of their day. Jesus Christ was on the cross on the 3rd hour, and then on the 6th hour, darkness came, and then the 9th hour, he gave up the ghost. Well, what are we talking about? At 6 o'clock, they started tabulating or counting their hours. So if you count 6, 7, 8, 9, you have 3 hours, Jesus Christ. Their 3rd hour is our 9 o'clock. Their 6th hour, 6 in the morning, is our 12 o'clock. Their 9th hour is our 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You have to do it that way. And remember, that's what our Bible studies are all about. Dimensions in doctrine is to make you see it whether you like it or not. That's what these things are for. I am determined that you're going to be able to see these things and picture them instantaneously. Well, wow, I never saw that. Yes, that's true. We haven't had this means and technology until now. We're going to try to utilize it so that you can, boom, immediately see it in your mind. So that's how Israel celebrated a day. From evening till evening, you'll celebrate your Sabbath. So from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. was the Jewish day. Okay, now what we're going to do at this point is take you through the Exodus chronology. The original Exodus is going to be a paradigm or a model for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And we can show you from the scriptures how that Israel started on a Wednesday in its Exodus, not on a Friday. It's going to be the model. So let's turn there. Exodus chapter 13, first of all. Exodus 13 and verse number 4. Now you will remember, those that were here for our studies, on the Feast of the Lord on Wednesday night. And Helen Franklin, who is a very knowledgeable, in fact, she had some pretty good insights, even though she's not a believer. But she studies the Bible because she believes that the Old Testament is from God and that God has meaning to her life as a Jew. After all, the covenant was made with them. She doesn't realize that Jesus Christ was her Messiah King. She does not realize that Jesus Christ has changed programs. We're now in grace. But she did provide some insight. One of the things she said, though, that we took exception with, is that the Jewish months are not named in the scriptures. And then she turned right around and said, but in the month of Aviv they came out. And she showed us a couple of scriptures to show what Aviv meant. It's when the ear of the barley grain is ripened and ready for harvest. Now, it is called the first month, but it is also called Aviv, and that's what we're talking about. Jesus Christ in the Jewish calendar died in the month of Aviv, their first month of the religious year. Verse 4. This day came ye, Israel, out of Egypt in the month Aviv. So that's important because Aviv in and of itself speaks of resurrection, speaks of coming forth, speaks of harvesting, the grain ripened and ready to be taken in, and so forth. So it's the month of Aviv. It's also the month where they would begin sowing their wheat seed, because 7 weeks later they would have their wheat harvest. And 7 weeks later, what Jewish feast day? Pentecost, you say. So it's all in keeping with this lunar agricultural cycle. Now let's go to chapter 12. Okay? And start reading with verse number 1. The Lord spake to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, This month shall be the beginning of months to you. It shall be the first month of the year. The first month is one way of designating it. Aviv is the second way of designating it. Speak to the congregation of Israel. In the 10th day of this month, you'll take every man a lamb for his household. We have discussed that. The lamb is said to be a male of the first year without spot or blemish. But it's verse number 6 that we want. And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Now, the Hebrew literally says, between the evenings. So right at 3 o'clock, from between 12 and 6, between the evenings, was 3 o'clock when the Passover lamb was killed. Now you note I have the blood applied here later on in the day in our illustration, because obviously, once you kill the lamb, time begins ticking. You've got to collect the blood. You've got to begin cooking the lamb, because as soon as it turns night, you've got to start eating the lamb. So they would cook it and collect the blood, take it to the house and so forth, and then apply the blood. So it was much later in the day. But the lamb died at 3 o'clock that afternoon. By the way, in exact fulfillment of this prophetic type, when did Jesus Christ die? The 9th hour of the Jewish day, or 3 o'clock in the afternoon between the evenings, because Christ is our Passover. He is the antitype of this, which was crucified for us. So he was killed at this particular time. But note when it was. Passover was on the 14th. Now, I've got Wednesday here, but we'll wait just a little bit. We're just going to assume it right at this point, but we'll get to proving it here in a while. Okay, now note verse number 10. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. Now wait one second. We're talking about the blood being applied. When was the Passover lamb killed? 3 o'clock on the 14th. Cooked, the blood applied. But when did they start eating it? In the evening. They started eating it on the night of the 15th. You see, another day transpired here. Time is marching on. And according to the Israeli day, the Passover day was finished. And they began eating the Passover lamb immediately from 6 o'clock onward. Now, something else, just before that day started, night fell and a new day came in. Note verse number 7. You kill it in the evening, but you have from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock to cook it, skin it, collect its blood, and take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and upper doorposts of the houses wherein you'll eat it. In verse number 11, this is the Lord's Passover. So, this all happened at this particular time. But as we moved in to the next day, note what happened here. We're in chapter 12. Let's go to verse number 29. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on the throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night. So here we go, time is marching on again. From 6 o'clock to midnight, the Jews are in the protective watch care of the blood on the door. They're eating the Passover lamb, fully clothed, because God promised them, you're gonna be free. I'm gonna get you out of Egypt here by morning. The death angel came at midnight, and naturally, here you've got you don't have sirens and traffic and all the other noises that go around in this modern day city. So everything is quiet. And all of a sudden you hear the screams of mothers all through the land, because there was not one house wherein somebody didn't die that night in the Egyptian city. So God killed the firstborn at this point at midnight. Pharaoh got up, ascertained the facts. Probably about 2 or 3 in the morning, he summons Moses and Aaron and said, "Get out." Make haste and get out. Verse number 31. So he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, "Rise up from among and get you forth from among my people, you and the children of Israel. Go and serve the Lord in the wilderness." Verse 33. My people are saying, "We be all dead men." Now that's the Egyptian form of Ebonics, I guess. I don't know. "We be all dead men." And the people took their dough before it was leavened and so forth, and carried their clothes on their shoulders, and they got out. So we're moving on down to verse number 42. "It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generation." So let's hold our place here and go back to Numbers chapter 33. Numbers chapter 33. So we have now come through the night. It's beginning to dawn. This is a night to be remembered because God put such pressure on the Egyptians and on Pharaoh because of the death of the firstborn. After all, he had just decimated them through 9 plagues. It wouldn't have taken me long. All you had to do was turn the blood to water, and I would have gotten the Israelites out of there. But 9 plagues. Then all of a sudden, then the 10th plague, the worst of them all, the death of the firstborn. Pharaoh said, "I've had enough. Get out." What day was this? Numbers chapter 33. "These are the journeys of the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Egypt with their armies, under the hand of Moses and Aaron. And Moses wrote their goings according to their journeys by the commandment of the Lord." In other words, God wanted us to learn these. He wanted future generations of Jews to learn it. He wanted us to learn it. Because if we learn these, we're going to be able to prove something. That Jesus Christ didn't die on a Friday. He died on a Wednesday. And that we have been perpetuating a religious falsehood. "And these are their journeys according to their goings out. And they departed from Ramses in the 1st month, on the 15th day of the 1st month. On the morrow after the Passover, the children of Israel went out with a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians." Okay, so let's turn back then to Exodus chapter 12. We now have the eating of the Passover, the death of the Egyptian firstborn, the call of Moses, the gathering of the children of Israel. And by the way, you're talking now of approximately 2 million people. And by that time, and you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have megaphones, you didn't have cable TV, and so forth. It took a little time to get all this together, so that by morning they began journeying. Now, where did they journey? Let's go to verse number 37 in chapter 12. "And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men besides children." I don't know why God didn't include the women here, but the combination of the children and the women made it up approximately 2 million people, it is guesstimated. But the point that we want to show you is that we have already covered now 2 days in this process. The Wednesday was taken care of with the death of the Passover. It's cooking and applying the blood just before the next day started at evening. At evening, the Passover was eaten. The death angel fell. The Israelites were collected and began their march. And so point number 3 here, they began from Ramses, which is where they were, the city of the Pharaoh, to Succoth. And so they traveled 1 day's journey and pitched their tent. Obviously, they slept that night. And let's move on then to the next. We're in chapter 12. Let's go to, excuse me, well, let's see, where are we here? Chapter 13, probably where I want to be. Well, okay. I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to solve that problem. Let's go to Numbers chapter 33 again. Numbers chapter 33 again. And we'll start reading with verse number 5. And the children of Israel removed from Ramses and pitched in Succoth. And they departed from Succoth and pitched in Etham, which is at the edge of the wilderness. So that's the second day. They slept at Succoth overnight. The day broke. They had their breakfast, packed their things, and made another day's journey to Etham. We're already now through 3 days of the Exodus chronology here. That's where they made another encampment, and obviously they slept. Okay, let's go to verse number 7. And they removed from Etham and turned again to Pi-hahiroth, which is before Baal-zephon, and so forth. And they departed from there, note verse 8, and passed through the midst of the sea. So they went to Etham, and they camped overnight, and they traveled a day's journey to Pi-hahiroth, and there again they pitched. Now let's go back now to chapter 14 of Exodus. Oh, yeah, and here's where I wanted to go there before. Chapter 13, verse number 20. Let's go there first. They took their journey from Succoth and encamped in Etham in the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them in the way, and by night a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. So he has done this now since this point on the second day here, and has taken them all the way to this point at the edge of the Red Sea. Now, he's doing this to make a point, because there is no escape. Before them is a very large body of water. Behind them is a very large Egyptian army. They have no arms, they have no weapons, and they're stuck. God's going to show his salvation. So we're in chapter 14. Let's look at verse number 2. Speak to the children of Israel that they turn and encamp before Pi-hahiroth, and so forth. Notice the last part of the verse. Before it ye encamp by the sea. Now what God is going to do is he is going to bring the Egyptians there, and they're going to say, we've got them trapped now. They can't get out. There's nothing they can do. Because they obviously cannot swim the distance there. They've got elderly people that make it. Even a good stout swimmer is not going to make it across at this particular point. They've got young people. They've got cattle. It'll never happen. We've got them trapped. So what does God do? But he parts the Red Sea. And they're going to begin their journey by night. So let's look, starting with verse number 10. When Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. They were sore afraid, and they cried out to the Lord. And they began their griping and their complaining. You just want us to die in the wilderness. And Moses said, no, verse 13, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Here is a testimony to the grace of God under law. There wasn't a single one of them that could divide the Red Sea. There wasn't a single one of them could do a thing about the situation. If they stayed where they were, they would eventually be overrun by the Egyptians. And what did God do? He was gracious, and he provided a way of escape that they might have victory. But the victory was provided by God himself. That's grace. They didn't have to do a thing but simply walk across, and that's faith. So let's read on. Verse 14. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. You're going to see something. So verse number 19. All of a sudden, you'll remember, they came and encamped, which meant that it was night. And we'll prove that it was nightfall. But by this time, we're entering into the 4th day of the Exodus chronology. And verse number 19 says, the angel of God went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, and it gave light by night to these, meaning the Israelites, so that the one came not near the other. Note this phrase, all the night. What does that mean? It meant that not only did the children of Israel have to walk through the Red Sea, as it were, with a wall of water here and a wall of water there that could have enclosed on them except by the power of God, but they had to do so at night. They crossed the Red Sea at night. But did they have light? Yes. The Shekinah glory column made it extra dark for the Egyptians and extra light for the Israelis, so that they could walk across without stubbing a toe, without stumbling, and so forth. And so during that night, there they go, right across the Red Sea. Verse number 22. The children of Israel went in the midst of the sea upon dry ground. The waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them. In other words, once they got pretty much across, then God was beginning to allure, as it were, the Egyptians into a cul-de-sac. No way out. It's going to be too far for them to run from the crushing waters that are about to come in on them in just a little bit. But note what happens. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked at the host of the Egyptians. When is the morning watch? The morning watch starts at 2 in the evening. I'm sure God had a few swigs of coffee by this time, and he wasn't bleary-eyed. He looks through the Shekinah glory cloud at them, and he sees them at 2 o'clock that night. And they're beginning to come in, so that the whole army is finally committed to this, so that the whole army is going to be destroyed. Through the pillar of fire and cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, took off their chariot wheels. Now we're going to have real trouble when that water starts coming back, because the horses can't even help you. And that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of the Lord, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said to Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians and upon their chariots. And Moses did this. Now note verse number 27, because it's an important verse of Scripture. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned in the strength when the morning appeared. So, we have 4 testimonies in what's called the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, of people coming very early in the morning, coming before sunrise to the tomb of the Lord Jesus Christ. And this is all simply a pattern. It is a model, starting from this day all the way till this day, starting from his death at 3 o'clock on the Passover until the morning of the 5th day later. Well, actually it's 4 after the Passover, again, depending on how you're counting here. But when the morning appeared, it was all over. The judgment was all done. The Egyptians were in the sea, and guess where the children of Israel were? On the other side. Resurrection of sorts. They went down There was a cloud over them. There was the water this way. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 that they were baptized to Moses under the cloud. And this happened when they went down in there, and it's a tomb type setting. But they came up free on the other side, and the Egyptians died. Now, the point that we are making here is that this provides for us a model. A 5-day model of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, let's turn to something easy here. Let's go to Matthew chapter 28. Okay? Now, we're going to, this part of our theology is a piece of cake. Herein we agree with the rest of Christendom who believes that Jesus Christ was resurrected on a Sunday. Think of it. Finally, we have an agreement. But every other day, starting with their Ash Wednesday, Lent, Monday, Thursday, Palm Sunday, Good Friday, all of those days are fabrications of men. They're the traditions of men that somebody decided they're going to teach to hold power over people. You observe these things or you're going to be excommunicated from our church and you can't be saved. You've got to be there and you've got to do thus and so and thus and so, and you've got to observe these days. Sometimes I think even grace people get tended that way. Oh boy, we just got to have Christmas and we just got to have Easter. And I think, okay, well, it's nice to be mindful of those things, but why do we gotta? Is my question. When the Apostle Paul says, let no man judge you with respect to holy days. It is the works people. It's the religious crowd that wants to do these things constantly. You know, it's a way of keeping people ignorant. If you're constantly being mindful of these days and have to go back and have your passion plays and the like, nothing wrong with seeing a passion play once in your life, but for crying out loud, do you realize that there is thousands upon thousands of doctrines built on the resurrection of Christ that those people are ignorant of, and they never march ahead, they never learn more. Fact of the matter is, they probably only go to your church on Easter and Christmas and so forth, and that's good enough for them. They punch their time clock. That's good enough for the year. What can God expect? Now, here's the easy part. Here's finally something we agree on. Jesus Christ was brought forth from the grave. Now, we'll show you by the end of this study that he was brought forth from the grave sometime after 6 o'clock and before midnight. All right, so let's see here, verse number 1 of chapter 28. And in the end of the Sabbath, which is the seventh day, it's Saturday, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And of course, by that time, he was already raised. So if you take this particular Passover paradigm, as this hour is coming to a close, you can easily see that we've been duped. And that if there is a way now, and this is what we're going to do starting at the next hour, we encourage you to stay for this if you're really interested in knowing. If you want to stay in your ignorance, okay, that's fine. Or if you want to criticize and say, well, that pastor doesn't know what he's talking about, and you're not giving me a hearing, then shame on you. But I'm telling you, in the next hour we will start, and I will prove to you, right from the scriptures, that the original Passover was sacrificed on a Wednesday, and that on a Sunday, Israel came up through the Red Sea and was brought up and out, a picture of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, 5 days later on a Sunday.